Hello and welcome back to Bunnyhoof Studio. Today I'm really excited to talk you through my doll project. I'm starting with the sculpt of the head and neck and will be painting the face and varnishing it towards the end. In a previous art vlog I went to the park with my friend and we experimented with making dolls together. I had 2 failed attempts at sculpting this head, but I learnt a lot from the mistakes I made and today is definitely a successful attempt. So I had already shaped the base of the head and the neck with foil, and I made the neck extra long as this becomes really useful when securely handling the doll head while sculpting and painting, especially when it's wet. I'm using air drying clay for the entirety of this sculpt, and having practiced a lot over the past year, I'm really starting to get the hang of it, I think. There's always room for improvement, but I'm really happy with the progress I've made. At first I covered the whole foil head with clay, but I found this a little hard to work with, honestly. The way I taught myself to sculpt faces was I would sculpt just the front of the face on a ball of foil, as I had initially planned in the beginning to make dolls by just attaching almost like a mask to a soft head, but I decided to start this full head sculpt just like that, and add the rest of the clay once I was happy with just the face. I'm not sure exactly why this worked better for me. I just found that working in increments like this was much less overwhelming and there was much less kind of wet clay to work with at a time. You can see here I now only have clay on the front of the foil and I'm adding more clay to build up the structure of the chin. These silicone tools are really useful. They really help with smoothing the clay out and attaching new parts. I also always have a pot of water with slip, which is very, very wet clay, which I can either use as glue or I can also use the water to smooth out and bind certain areas. I mark the center of the face vertically and horizontally so I can make the face as even as possible. I still haven't quite mastered creating a perfectly symmetrical face, but I'm getting there little by little. I like to think that the slight imperfections will help give my dolls some extra charm. I do want my dolls to look handmade, but in more of an artisanal way than a school project way. We'll see if I achieve that over the weeks of working on this one. The plush doll with a clay face I created, that you can view the process video of on my channel, had a slightly different technique with regards to the nose and eyes. For that I used the round handle of a paintbrush to indent across where the eyes would be, and it created a natural bridge where the nose would then be. I found this worked much better than what I'm doing in this video, but I think it's really up to the individual. It's really just a case of finding different things and seeing what works best for you. So rather than starting off with an already concave space where the eye sockets would be, I'm carving them out. I think this is perhaps a better method if you want to go for a more realistic sculpted look. And I think the other technique gives more of a kind of anime-esque side profile, but the beauty of clay is that you can always work more into something or add more clay if you want something to look more realistic or more stylized. So I spent a lot of time last year experimenting with making dolls' faces. The majority of them were kind of hideous. It can be really tough to get the balance between creepy but sweet and extreme uncanny valley. I also think finding this balance is also going to be subjective somewhat, so it's really just dependent on what kind of dolls or sculpts you want to make. With my plush doll face, I decided that instead of sculpting the eyes, I just wanted curved mounds as I'm painting the eyes on, rather than using eyeballs. I think this looks much better painted onto a mostly flat surface. So I'm carving out a space where I will put some small clay mounds that will be painted eyes by the end of this video. Building up the face structure can also take a long time. I make lots of small adjustments, adding bits of clay and gently carving parts away too. I've also found it's good to add extra clay for the mouth area, otherwise the lips will sit too far into the face rather than lifting outwards away from the profile more. This is something I also learnt from lots of trial and error. At this stage I was really happy with the chin shape. I liked how pointed it was, but I wanted the cheeks to have a little more fullness. You need surprisingly little clay to add more volume to the appearance of a face. I'm often quite surprised by how often I add too much even when I'm trying not to. And now I'm adding the mounds that will have the painted eyes over them. So I actually came up with this idea from looking at hundreds and hundreds of images of dolls. I was trying to figure out what wasn't working with my own past experiments, and funnily enough, I realised that I wanted to try this technique from looking at Barbie dolls. The eyes are printed on, but the head mould just has little mounds under those eyes. They aren't sculpted at all. I realised this might be my best chance at getting the feel I really wanted from my faces. I found that when I painted over already sculpted eye sockets with hard ridges, it really drew attention to the fact that the eyes were painted on. Somehow it affected the viewers, or rather my ability to suspend disbelief. It somehow took me out of the illusion of the doll face. I find creating faces this way helps them feel more soulful. They don't look real, but they kind of feel real on an emotional level. It's a little hard to explain. It's a kind of more of a feeling thing you have when you look at something. I've gotten a lot better at sculpting lips too. I find dragging the clay up to create the upper lip and then adding a tiny amount of clay for the lower lip seems to work really well for me. I use my tools to shape the edges and the cupid's bow of the lips. I also often will end up adding a little bit more clay to the upper lip as well. It really just depends how it shapes out. I make lots of minute adjustments using this metal tool. They're so minute, I don't think they even really translate very well onto video, but they are essential for either smoothing the face more or for creating very subtle changes in the features. If anything looks too flat, I add tiny bits of clay. It can be quite fiddly, so I tend to rely on sharp edges to help me out rather than my fingers. The lips have become one of my favourite parts to sculpt. I think it's because it adds so much to the character and soul of the face. I love adding the crease between the upper and bottom lip, deciding if I want a slight smile or a more downturned, grumpy expression. I would definitely love to make a grumpy doll one day. I think I'll enjoy the challenge of making her look grumpy but lovable. My previous plush doll face, I gave her little buck teeth and I really liked that addition. I definitely want to create some more dolls with little teeth or maybe some fangs, or I don't know, I have so many ideas. Another day in the studio. So I actually started this doll face quite some time ago. I work on dolls in my spare time, so often I can go quite a few weeks between working on various aspects. It's partly why it's taking me so long to complete this one. But the closer I am now, the more excited I am to plan her hair and clothes and character traits. I think I also want to give all of my dolls at least one little accessory, like a book or a bag or something like that. I think it really adds to how special the doll feels. This is the soft body that I was working on in the park with my friend. I will need to unstitch the neck in order to add the head into the body and then secure it, but that should be easy enough. I'm also sculpting tiny hands and feet for her too, that will be attached to soft arms and to the bottom of the legs, and this will be a separate video that I'll show of me sculpting those and painting them. I'm hoping to also make anthropomorphic dolls one day too. I did experiment last year making a rabbit and a sheep head, and would like to try this again for a full doll. I saw some mystery box dolls online that were centaurs, and I really liked those as an idea. Also something I'd like to experiment with. I've noticed that mystery box ball jointed dolls have become quite popular recently, and it's really interesting seeing all the different designs they come up with. One of the hardest things about doing this, honestly, is how many ideas I have versus how much time I don't have to make them all. I was thinking it could be really fun to create illustrations of my doll ideas to help satiate this side of my creativity a bit. If you're new to my channel, I'm also an ink illustrator, so I have videos of myself doing detailed ink illustrations as well as my other projects with clay and dolls. And now to add the rest of the clay to form the head and neck. This was really satisfying to do, and I definitely preferred it to starting out with a full clay head. It gave me a better idea of the proportions of the skull and how those related to the features I had now made. Creating ears was a complete unknown to me. I had technically made some tiny circles and put them on a head I attempted to make in the art vlog in the park, but I knew from that I wanted to create something more detailed. I also knew I wanted the tops of the ears to stick out a little. I cut out a shape in clay for the ears and attached it to the side, blending them in and cutting away at the ears when I realised they were a little too big and the shape wasn't quite right. I experimented with various tools to carve out the shapes inside of the ear, switching between the metal tool, scalpel, and the pointed silicone tool. The second ear was much faster, as I had figured out that just cutting away the inside grooves with a scalpel first was much quicker, before refining the shapes. I went back and forth many times, carving extra little bits and smoothing out the area with water. I would love to create characters in the future with sculpted elf ears or horns maybe. And that is it so far for the wet sculpting part of the head. Now it's for quite a time-consuming part, and that is sanding. Once the air-dry clay is completely dry, the only way, to my knowledge, of making the clay smooth is to sand it a lot. So I always wear a mask for this, as I learnt that clay powder can be really bad for you to breathe in over prolonged periods. So creatives, please take care of your health so we can all continue to make art together when we are old and crumpled in parks. I am already becoming old and crumpled, but I'm trying my best to care for my health in the process. I start with a harsher sandpaper to get rid of any large bumps, and then move on to a lighter paper to make the head beautiful and smooth. Sanding makes such a big difference. I think it was the biggest game changer for me in my sculpting. So the time spent doing this is so worth it. The first faces I tried making, I didn't sand before experimenting with painting them, and they looked so much worse as a result of this. The paint will lay on the surface so much better, and if you manage to sand for long enough, it may even look a little like porcelain. Even when the clay is dry, you can add more water to areas if you want to tweak parts of the sculpt some more. I really love this freedom of using air drying clay. I also love how easy it is to add more clay onto a sculpt. If you're struggling with how delicate the wet clay is, it can be good to wait for the base to dry before adding more fiddly things on top, as you will have a nice firm base to work on instead of dealing with everything being wet and super malleable. You could just sculpt the shape of the head, wait for it to dry, and then think of adding the nose and the lips onto the top. Once I'm done sanding, I cover the whole sculpt in a layer of water in order to get rid of any surface clay dust. This also helps with the smooth appearance once it's dry. Even though sanding is time-consuming, I found it was actually quite a fun form of procrastination from other things I didn't want to be doing. Despite all my sanding, there were still a few imperfections that I wanted to fix in the sculpt, and I find these are much easier to fix once it's all dry. It's a lot easier to add tiny pieces of clay onto a hardened surface and then to blend them. The first area was the bottom lip. It was a little bit uneven, so I added a tiny amount extra to one side. I moistened the area before adding more clay, and smooth it into the face with a tool. A really good trick for knowing if your sculpt or even a drawing is maybe a little uneven is to look at it in a mirror. Seeing it from this new perspective, you can often figure out where the asymmetry is that you otherwise wouldn't have noticed. I always have a mirror by my desk for exactly this, and I think I would feel really lost without it. You can also take a photo of your work and flip it if you want to see it in reverse. I forgot to mention actually that I left the sculpt unsanded, as I'm going to be making a wig for my doll that will either be glued or attached with an elastic at the base of the wig. So I wanted a little bit of texture for the glue to bond to, or for the elastic to be less likely to slip off of. I add a little clay to the underside of the nose, and I also cover up this crack in the neck. I add a little clay to the underside of the nose, and I also cover up this crack in the neck. This crack was formed when the sculpt was drying. This can happen if the area dries a bit too fast. This was very easy to fix though. The neck was also a little bit uneven with a dent that I hadn't noticed while sculpting, so I added more clay to this area too. The right side, where the mouth meets the cheek, also had a deeper crevice than the other side, mostly only noticeable if light was hitting the face in a certain way, but I decided to add more clay to this area to keep the face more symmetrical and smooth. Using a needle for the final mouth details is also my favourite thing to do. Adding those little extra gaps to the corner of the lips somehow really brings the face to life. It really adds a little more character and expression. All of these additions were actually very quick and easy to do, although I must confess I waited months to actually add these. I was, however, working on the hands and feet for this doll in the meantime, and I was making a plush doll for my friend, so it was time well spent away from this. Once these small touch-ups were dry, I also sanded these down and sealed them with water. And now to get started on the face painting, also known as a face-up. The last doll face I painted was with watercolour pencils and watercolour paints. I found this gave a really nice softness to the features, and it's also been really fun to play around with a medium I don't use much. One day I'd love to get some highly pigmented pastels that I can apply pigment to the face like makeup. I'd also like to make dolls with different skin tones. I'm not sure if it would be better to pigment the clay first or to add the pigment after with paint or powder. I'll have to do some research before I try that. I know there is clay specifically for doll making that comes in various skin tones. The last time I filmed a doll face-up, I created a page of swatches as I hadn't used these pencils before. For this doll, I decided I wanted her to have bright green eyes, so I'm creating swatches of all my green pencils to see which colours I want to use. I'm using the brand Mondeluge and Pentel, and there's a random pencil in the mix from a brand called Prismeldu. These brush pens are also really fun to use. I'm using the brand Pentel for mine. They're pretty inexpensive and perfect if you want to paint and create art in cafes or away from your desk. I love how the colours deepen as I add water. There's something really cathartic about creating colour swatches. I almost want to buy more art materials just so I can make more swatches. I was a little nervous about drawing onto my head sculpt, as I had been working on it for so long. I was feeling a little too precious about it, so I decided to practice the colours I wanted to use beforehand. The good thing about starting off with watercolour pencils though, is that it can be very easily removed from the sculpt with a rubber or even water actually. This is a Faber-Castell sharpener, and I can confirm it is very good and enjoyable to use, although I don't know how much variance there really is between sharpeners. And now to start. So I begin with the outline, only pressing lightly in case I want to remove any, and then move on to the outline of the iris in dark green. I love this turquoise pencil colour for the top half of her eyes, and then this bright green for the bottom. I like leaving the centre of the eyes very light and almost white and reflective. Once I'm happy with this initial stage, I use a very fine paintbrush with a little water to blend the pencil colour. So I keep building on the layers, adding more pigment to create more depth and contrast, just depending on how it looks once I've added some water and blended things. With the lips, I start off very light to see how I feel about the pigment, and then gradually add more if I think it would work well. It's also very easy to remove pigment if you've added too much. You just add water to the area and wipe away. I'm adding a little blush to her nose and cheeks and carefully shaping her eyebrows. I add a little contouring to her face too. I think I would like to get better at skin pigments and probably need to do some experiments on flat, dry pieces of clay to see what works well. It can be hard to know how much colour and pigment to use, and I think it would be easier to get a smooth finish with powder rather than wet paint. I loved adding a little blush to her ears. I think it looks very sweet, and I'm hoping to create a hairstyle that means we get to see her ears poking out a little. Once I was happy with the base of the face, I mixed some watercolours to add more definition to parts of the lashes and lips, including some little orange dots in her green eyes. These extra details really help to bring the face to life and give it more vibrancy. Adding the white highlights though really is the true finishing touch to the paintwork. I add them to the centre of the iris and to the whites of the eyes to clean up the edges a bit. I also add the tiniest dots to her lips to give them a little sheen. So I know I keep saying this, but this part might actually be my favourite, the varnishing. This varnish isn't really from a well-known brand. This gloss varnish in the larger bottle was given to me by someone that bought it years ago, and the small one is matte varnish I bought from a local art store, but the brands are Ursä and Talons, if you are interested. I always wear a mask and open my window when varnishing, as the chemicals are quite strong, and I also just personally really hate strong chemical smells, so the mask really makes a difference. I pick a tiny paintbrush and add the gloss varnish to her eyes. I absolutely love the effect this gives to her face. It's so satisfying to see her lips and eyes glisten. I spontaneously added just a tiny bit to the end of her nose too. I then cover the rest of her face, ears and neck with the matte varnish. This isn't at all visible once dry, but it helps to lock in the pigment. I avoid varnishing the sculpt as I want to make sure any glue I might use to attach a future wig will be able to bond properly to the clay. Months ago, I bought some doll hair online that can be sewn into a wig and then styled. I had initially thought I would give this doll black hair, but I decided this deep red suited her much better. I thought I'd take some shots showing how she will look with this colour, and you can let me know what you think. I think it really suits her, and I'm excited to get to work on painting her hands, feet, and making her wig and clothes. And just some finishing shots now that her varnish is all dried. This is my first ever completed full doll head that I have also painted. I am really excited to see what she will become over the weeks, and I will be sharing her creation process with you here. Next time I will be showing you the very intricate process of sculpting her hands and feet and then painting them. I think it will be very exciting once I add her head and her hands and feet to the soft body, and even more exciting when she has a full outfit and accessories. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you love watching cozy process videos of drawing and making, as well as my studio art vlogs. Take care.